J. Cole dropped what he's calling a limited audio series, which is a podcast.
Yep.
Um, it's
I
weird,
think
but
it's cute. Oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I think it's cute the way people these days are trying to say it's not a podcast when it is.
It's weird, especially because they made sure to let us know this is season one. So it's a podcast. Like, it's not a limited audio series. Like, it's cute that you trying to remix it, but just call it a podcast.
You
There are
don't get
plenty of podcasts out there that have seasons, and they'll say season one of our podcast drops this day, season two of our podcast drops this day. Just call it a podcast with seasons. Plenty of podcasters do that.
and you don't get a prize for thinking of a cool name, that isn't podcast for your project that you do. I just think it's kind of silly. Like,
You know,
don't say, don't say podcast. It's like, okay, whatever.
it's very weird. But anyway, it was recorded back in 2022. Oh, the podcast, the limited audio series, quote
What is a
unquote.
limited audio series? I don't. The more you say it, the more it frustrates me. Like, what? What are you talking about? What does that mean? A
Nobody
limited
knows.
audio series, and how is it limited if it's coming back for a season two? That doesn't make any sense. Like,
Excuse me.
it's like when Max lies and says that, and I don't mean to call them out. This is just the first one that came to mind. They're not
Call
the
them
only
out.
ones that do it. But it's like when they say, oh, limited series. And then what was that show? Big Little Lies. Big Little Lies with Nicole Kidman and some other people I can't remember right now. It was a great limited series. And then they were like, hey, y'all like this so much. You know what we're gonna do? We're gonna give you a season two. It's not a limited series anymore.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah. So the show is called Inevitable. And it's supposed to be following J. Cole's career from the very beginning up until now. And so that's really cool. What's more interesting to me is something that kind of came simultaneously is J. Cole's first mixtape, The Come Up, is now on digital streaming platforms, or as we call them, DSPs, or as Dash likes to call them, the streamers. And so this project, Inevitable, speaks about, they say the first episode gets into The Come Up. I have not listened to it. I don't know if I will be. But they say it speaks about him recording The Come Up, and they're even playing unreleased songs and songs that were great that never came out, songs that sucked that never came out. There's like a trailer, and they speak about how if certain songs came out, it would have ruined his career. It would have been terrible, etc. And so I think the bigger deal, I think that's cool, minus the limited series name. And if you're a J. Cole fan, maybe you really want to listen to something like that, to kind of, because it pulls back behind the curtain and speaks about him grinding as an underground artist up into becoming this huge superstar. However, I think the bigger deal is the project going on streaming platforms, because he had to clear a lot of samples and he had to get a lot of permissions. We don't see this very often from artists of his caliber. It's kind of rare that we see mixtapes going on streaming platforms. I know Travis Scott did it, Lil Wayne did it. Those are megastars, and there's nothing to dispute there, but it's still something rare. We don't see it very often. It's not like everyone just has all their mixtapes on streaming today, especially on all platforms. I know Tidal for a long time had people's mixtapes and you were allowed to put it up there. I don't know the legal side of that, but I know like when you have Tidal, there's a lot of the mixtapes up there. But that's not the case for a lot of the other platforms. So the fact that the Come Up is now on all the platforms, I think it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
So,
he's definitely making his rounds. He's returning to the scene.
yep.
He took a little break, a little summer break.
Right.
And he says school's back in session. So,
yep.
That's great. That's exciting. I will check out Inevitable. I heard the clip. thought the
Hmm.
clip was interesting. I don't know. I don't necessarily. I don't know. I haven't tried it much. I like hearing the old stories. I like understanding the origins of certain things. I don't listen to a lot of hip hop content. That sounds so weird sitting here and
Yeah, I was
saying
about to ask you what do you mean by that?
I don't listen to hip hop podcasts.
Okay.
I just don't. I listen to a lot of pop culture podcasts, entertainment podcasts. I seek out hip hop information. Don't get me wrong. Like, in order to do this podcast, I have to be tapped in.
Right.
But I don't actually consume like audio that is like this. Um, I used to listen to the Joe Budden podcast regularly. I don't anymore. I might hear an episode on occasion, depending on, whether it gets recommended to me or something goes viral or whatever. Then I do that. But outside of that, I don't really listen to it. And I used to listen to Drink Champs a lot more. We used to talk about Drink Champs a lot more when
Yeah,
we
we
did
did.
the other pod.
That's
Um,
true.
so that's what I mean. I don't really consume content like this at this stage.
Got you.
And I was thinking that just the other day, I feel like I should be a little bit more tapped into what's happening in the hip hop world via podcasts because I listen to a lot of podcasts anyway.
Hmm.
So I'll check this out. I don't know. I don't know if it's my thing. I don't know. I don't necessarily need a description of every, all your favorite songs and how you made them. I don't necessarily need that. I do think those stories are interesting. I just don't know how much of it I want to consume.
Got you.
So, but I do plan on checking it out because it's J. Cole, and I feel like he's worthy of a listen.
Hmm.
Um, as much as I told him off and cursed him out a few months ago, I still think he is super talented, and I still look forward to whatever he's putting out. So I'll definitely check it out.
Got you. Yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna listen to it or not. I know a lot about J. Cole's story, and clearly this is gonna be something that will teach you even more if you're curious.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm not sure. And as far as Drink Champs, I haven't watched as many Drink Champs episodes because it's a guest-based podcast, and their guests as of late have not been very exciting for me. Um,
Fair.
yeah, I think they're making some changes over there, and that's a whole nother topic for another time. But that's why I haven't watched as many or listened to as many. Um,
Yeah.
so it's not to say that there has not been any guest that's caught my attention.
Mm.
But also to sit and listen to this person for 3, 4 hours or 2, 3 hours is a different ball game than, a regular interview. So,
And they're drinking, and Nori's basically trying to coax them into having certain conversations. It's a very different format over there.
mhm.
That's not to dive too deep into this, but that's kind of always been my challenge with Drink Champs. I gotta like the guest,
Right.
and then from there, it's like, am I gonna make it through the whole episode, even if I like the guest? Because it's long,
Right.
and some of the information is not. Some of the information I don't need.
Right. And
you
then
know.
I think what's interesting is I think they kind of know that because if you look some of the episodes that are like amazing guests, the episode be like an hour. Like Nas was up there for an hour, Mike Tyson was up there for an hour.
Yeah. Like, let's get to the juice. I feel like sometimes because I typically don't like guest based podcasts. I do not like
Right.
podcasts
Yeah,
like that.
I'm not a huge fan of them either.
So, and then when my favorite podcasters have guests on their shows, it takes everything out of me to listen to or watch those shows. I often skip them because I don't feel like the flow. I feel like the guests fuck up the flow.
Yeah, I can understand that. That's a big complaint about the Joe Budden podcast and always has been.
I
People
can
hate
see.
when Joe Budden podcast has guests.
Yeah. And not to call
Um,
read in the same breath as the Joe Budden podcast because I feel like that is
I thought that was blasphemous.
It is. But I will say they had like they've had guests before, but they kind of made a rule very early on, like years ago. They were like, I can't remember who they had. Was it Bobby Brown? It was like somebody super rich. No, it was CBJ.
Okay.
They had Stevie J on their show, and it was on some. Oh, Stevie J was in the studio, and so somebody was like, "Oh, y'all should interview him. You know, he's on a little run, on a little tour. Why don't
Hmm.
y'all interview him?" And they interviewed him, and it went terribly. And they vowed to never interview anybody again. So it's very rare. Like I think it's been years since their last guest.
Got you.